guardian and protector. To thee, the Lord has entrusted the souls of the redeemed to be led into heaven. Pray therefore the God of peace to crush Satan beneath our feet, that we no longer return man's captivity.
Hey, can you hear me?
For the glory of God.
Beginning of the movie, a man arrives at a house and observes the strange surroundings. Maria Rose opens the door and asks if he is the medical examiner, to which he confirms. As the man is about to enter a room, he encounters Father Richard, who quietly walks away. After a while, the man comes downstairs and informs Nathaniel Rose that he cannot conclusively determine that the cause of death of her daughter is natural. We then see a lawyer named Erin Bruner, whose boss informs her that the DA has charged the priest with negligent homicide. Although a reasonable plea bargain was offered, the priest declined it. Her boss explains that the archdiocese specifically requested her because they believe she is smart and convincing, and they want her to ask the priest to reconsider the deal. Erin agrees to take the case, but in return, she demands to be made a senior partner. Erin then visits Father Richard and clarifies that she chose this case to become a senior partner at her firm. He asks if she is Catholic, to which she replies that she is agnostic. The father tells her that he doesn't think she is the right attorney and that he will stick with his public defender. Erin responds that his public defender cannot get the DA to offer a better deal, which she can. Father Richard replies that he won't be making any plea agreements, to which Erin warns him that if he doesn't, he will be stuck in jail awaiting trial. Father asks if, by letting her defend him, she will promise to let him testify and tell the truth about what happened to Emily. She asks if it was his fault that Emily died. When he says no, she agrees to let him tell his story, but insists that he must agree to let her do whatever else it takes to win. Erin visits Emily's house, where Maria shares that Emily's dream was to become a teacher, which led her to attend university. Erin notices many cats, and Maria explains there are 11, as Emily always brought strays home since she was a child. Erin asks if Emily was happy before her troubles began, and Maria confirms she was very happy before going to university. Later, prosecutor Ethan Thomas meets with Erin to inform her that the judge suggests offering a new plea deal to her client, reducing charges to reckless endangerment with a 6-month jail sentence. Thomas asks Erin to convince her client to accept, warning that refusal will lead to pursuing the maximum penalty. Erin tells Ethan that Father Richard refuses to lie or admit to something he isn't guilty of and was never neglectful of Emily. Ethan asks if she has seen the post-mortem photos, but Erin insists they will go to trial to reveal the truth. That night, Erin's wristwatch stops at 3 o'clock while she sleeps. The next day in court, Thomas presents his plea, stating that the victim had a serious medical condition that required treatment. He argues that her condition made her incapable of caring for herself, and Father Richard, the defendant, was responsible for her care. Thomas claims that Father Richard betrayed this responsibility by choosing religious treatment over medical care and performed a ritual exorcism, which he argues directly led to the victim's death. Thomas shows a photo of Emily Rose before the religious treatment and another taken on the day she died, concluding by emphasizing that he stands for Emily Rose, who died horribly at 19. Erin stands and requests to reserve her opening statement until after the defense's case, reassuring Father Richard that this was her plan. Thomas then calls Dr. Edith Vogel, who has known Emily her whole life and cared for all the Rose girls. Thomas asks Dr. Vogel to describe Emily growing up, and she says Emily was somewhat sickly in her early years, spending a lot of time indoors reading and learning music. When Thomas asks if Emily talked about going to college, Vogel confirms that Emily was excited, but nervous about being away from her family in the city. Thomas asks if Emily stayed in touch after leaving for college. Dr. Vogel responds that Emily wrote her a letter about attending a dance and meeting a boy named Jason, which she didn't want her mother to know due to her mother's disapproval. Thomas then inquires if Emily communicated with her again last fall. Vogel replies that it was actually Emily's mother who contacted her, calling her at 4 in the morning and asking her to call Emily at a payphone on campus. When Emily answered, she was hysterical, initially sobbing uncontrollably. Eventually, she calmed enough to explain to Dr. Vogel that she had been alone that weekend because her roommate had gone home. She had awakened thinking she smelled something burning and, fearing a fire, got up to check. A sudden bang startled her, and she discovered another door open. Terrified, she rushed to close it and then returned to her room in fear. Emily lay on her bed, trying to sleep, but woke to a noise and saw the pen holder on her table move and fall. Then her blanket slipped off, and the mattress began sinking as if someone had climbed on it. An invisible entity started choking her and attempted to lift her top. Despite her efforts to resist, the entity took control. Eventually, Emily fell off the bed, screaming in fear, and ran out of the room. Dr. Mueller, chairman of the Department of Neurology, tells the court that he initially suspected Emily might have taken illegal drugs, but tests showed no traces of drugs. He thought it could be epilepsy, and explains that severe seizures can cause loss of consciousness and involuntary muscle contractions, which might feel like extreme pressure and lead to strange perceptions. An electroencephalograph revealed a possible epileptic focus in Emily's left temporal lobe, and he started her on Gambatrol with advice for follow-up exams. However, Emily missed these appointments, believing her condition was spiritual due to Father Richard's influence. She stopped the medication based on his advice, which Dr. Mueller suggests may have contributed to her death. Erin asks if Emily's experiences of objects moving and feeling an invisible presence were typical epilepsy symptoms. The doctor replies no. Erin then asks if these symptoms could indicate psychosis. The doctor confirms yes. Erin continues by asking if psychosis is a different condition from epilepsy, to which the doctor agrees. Erin questions whether the doctor is selectively interpreting Emily's symptoms to fit an epilepsy diagnosis while ignoring signs of psychosis. The doctor remains silent, and Erin concludes with no further questions. Later, Erin meets Father Richard, who warns her about dark, powerful forces surrounding the trial and advises caution. Erin replies that, as an agnostic, she isn't concerned, but Father Richard insists that demons exist whether or not you believe in them, and that her involvement might expose her to their attack. Erin thanks him for his concern, but shifts the focus to the case, explaining that Thomas is using the medical aspects as ammunition. She emphasizes the need to concentrate on their defense with the time they have. Erin then meets Jason, who tells her that Emily once told him that in her room, she resisted the demons, but at the hospital they overcame her, and after that, things just went from bad to worse. He describes an incident where, while in class, Emily heard a demonic voice, saw a demonic face on the window, and was terrified when the boy next to her appeared demonic, causing her to flee the classroom. On her way to her dorm, Emily encounters a demonic couple, and Jason sees her running toward the university chapel in fear. Inside the chapel, Emily is terrified by the sight of two demonic women, and as Jason enters the chapel, he sees the women fleeing in fear. Jason finds Emily standing still inside. As he approaches her, he is scared by her strange behavior. Emily looks at him and says, "Don't touch me," before collapsing. She then pleads with Jason not to leave her. Jason tells Erin that he never left and stayed with her until the end. That night, Erin suddenly wakes up at 3 a.m., smelling something burning. Perplexed, she goes to the kitchen to check but finds everything normal. Suddenly, the kitchen light goes off. Confused, she fills a glass to drink water, but is startled by the sound of a creaking door and sees a shadow of the door closing. Quickly, she shuts and locks the kitchen door. Meanwhile, Father Richard wakes up to the sound of someone whispering. He gets up to investigate, and seeing a shadowy figure, he gets alarmed and begins to recite prayers, causing the figure to disappear. The next day, Dr. Briggs explains that the autopsy revealed Emily's starving body had little means to recover from her injuries, eventually leading to her death. Some injuries were from violent epileptic seizures, while others were self-inflicted. After reviewing her complete medical file, he concluded that Emily's epilepsy had evolved into psychotic epileptic disorder, a rare but observed condition. He explains that this disorder causes seizures with symptoms resembling schizophrenia, such as auditory and visual hallucinations, and extreme paranoia. The seizures can lock joints, contort the body, and dilate pupils, making the eyes appear black. Thomas asks if this condition could be controlled with Gambatrol, and Dr. Briggs confirms that it could have been if Emily had continued her treatment, and he adds that if treated early, the condition is rarely fatal. Erin asks Dr. Briggs how he knows Gambatrol could have controlled Emily's condition, to which he replies that it is the inevitable result of taking the drug. Erin points out that Emily was still experiencing psychotic symptoms after starting the medication, to which Dr. Briggs explains that Gambatrol has a cumulative effect and takes time to build up in the system. Erin then says, so he assumed Gambatrol would have helped her, but he doesn't know for sure? To which Dr. Briggs concedes, saying it's a reasonable assumption, but he can't be certain. Erin asks if psychotic epileptic disorder is a common medical term, to which Dr. Briggs replies that he distinguished and named it. Erin then asks what should have been done when Emily chose to stop her medical treatment. Briggs responds that he could have tranquilized and force-fed her, and if necessary, to save her life, he would have treated her with electroconvulsive therapy against her will. The judge announces a recess until tomorrow, and Erin apologizes to Father Richard for being late, explaining that she didn't sleep last night. Father Richard replies that he didn't sleep either and tells her she is under attack. He explains that she is in a spiritual battle and that the forces of darkness are trying to keep her away from the light, urging her not to let them succeed. That evening, desperate to win the case, Erin reads about demonic possession. Her assistant Ray suggests they could bring in some priests to discuss exorcisms, but she says the archdiocese won't allow it. However, she has 3 articles by an anthropologist who wrote the book she's reading. This anthropologist approaches the subject of possession from a scientific perspective and doesn't try to debunk it. The next day, Erin addresses the court, stating that Mr. Thomas contends Emily Rose suffered from a serious medical condition requiring medical treatment only. He has claimed that any attempt by her client to help Emily with anything other than medical means was not only inappropriate, but criminally negligent. Erin argues that medical treatment was not the answer for Emily because she did not suffer from a medical condition, but from demonic possession. She explains that an exorcism was her only hope for a cure, and after the doctor's attempts failed, Father Richard tried to help Emily using an approach that he, Emily, and her family firmly believed was her only chance for relief. She says she will demonstrate that, despite Father Richard's best efforts and sincere love for Emily, there was nothing he could have done to prevent her death. In a flashback, we see Emily taking Gambatrol with Jason. Despite the medication, she begins to hear surrounding noises extremely loudly. Jason remembers she found it unbearable to hear the clinking of spoons and forks. She was always hungry, but claimed the demons inside her wouldn't let her eat. That night, he walked her back to the dorm, where she appeared nervous and scared. He held her for a while to calm her down, but when he woke up, she was no longer beside him, and he found her on the floor with her body completely stiff. Scared and concerned, he approached her, but she screamed in a demonic voice. He called her father, and he told him to bring Emily home. Nathaniel tells the court that after that night, Emily stayed home and didn't return to school, continuing to deteriorate, and when her condition worsened, they called Father Richard. Upon arriving, Father Richard sent Nathaniel's daughter Alice upstairs to check if Emily was awake. But to Alice's horror, she found Emily in the corner of a room, eating spiders. Emily looked at Alice and screamed and began scratching the wall and jumping. Hearing her screams, Nathaniel and Father rush to her room and try to stop and control Emily. They both are barely able to control her, and when the father asks her if she can hear him, she begins to say something in Latin, after which her body becomes stiff. Nathaniel and Father Richard manage to lift her off the floor, and Emily then said in Latin, "He is the one who dwells within." The demon then dared Father Richard to cast it out of Emily, after which Emily collapsed, and as Father Richard checked her, the demon attacked him. Thomas asks Nathaniel if he has ever visited an insane asylum or a hospital for the mentally ill. Nathaniel replies that he visited one once when his aunt was there before she died. Thomas suggests that there is a history of mental illness in Nathaniel's family and asks if he would consider someone eating insects on a street corner to be mentally ill. Nathaniel agrees. Thomas then asserts that the behavior he observed in his daughter's bedroom that night could be consistent with psychosis, to which Nathaniel responds that Emily had never shown such problems before, and it did not seem like psychosis to him or Father Richard. Thomas asks Nathaniel if, after that night, he placed his daughter entirely in Father Richard's care, to which Nathaniel confirms that he did. Erin calls Dr. Sadira Adani, who tells the court that she is currently a professor of anthropology and psychiatry at Northwestern University. Erin asks about her specific area of expertise, to which Dr. Adani explains that she studies the spiritual experiences of people in various cultures and the physiological and psychological changes they undergo during these experiences. Erin asks if she specializes in the scientific study of possession, to which Dr. Adani confirms this, explaining that possession is a term for a basic human experience reported by many people worldwide. She has seen many individuals who felt invaded by an entity from the supernatural realm. Erin asks why she thinks Emily was invaded, to which Dr. Adani explains that, based on her study, she believes Emily was a hypersensitive, someone unusually connected to what Carlos Castaneda called the separate reality, making her susceptible to invasion by alien entities. Thomas objects, arguing that Emily suffered and died, questioning the need for pseudoscientific analysis. The judge calls both counselors to the bench, and Thomas argues the testimony is ridiculous. But Erin defends its relevance, citing widespread supernatural beliefs and Adani's expertise. After hearing both sides, the judge decides they will hear what Dr. Adani has to say. Erin asks Dr. Adani why she thinks Emily's exorcism failed, to which she explains that the exorcism ritual results in specific brain activity that cuts the person off from the possession experience. However, Emily's exorcism could not have achieved this, because the doctor gave her gambatrol, which has a sedative effect on the brain. The drug made her immune to the psycho-spiritual shock that the exorcism was intended to provide. Gambatrol kept Emily in a possessed state, preventing her from responding to the exorcism and ultimately contributing to her death. Thomas asks Dr. Adani if she has ever used gambatrol in her studies. She replies, "No, because that would be dangerous for the patient." Thomas then says that her claim that Emily's medication harmed her is merely her own theory. Later, Ray tells Erin that he found a doctor who wants to testify and was present at the exorcism. Erin approaches Father Richard and asks about Dr. Cartwright, insisting that she needs all the information to defend him, to which Father Richard explains that Dr. Cartwright had asked him to keep his involvement confidential. Erin meets with Dr. Cartwright, who tells her that he hoped Father Richard wouldn't need his help, but he doesn't want to see him imprisoned. He explains that he was Father Richard's parishioner at St. Vincent's Church about 15 years ago and hadn't been in contact until last fall when Father Richard requested a medical perspective during Emily's exorcism. He confirms that Emily was neither schizophrenic nor epileptic. He had seen many cases, but Emily's condition scared him, and if he had known, he would have never been there. He examined Emily before leaving that night and found her lucid and aware of a separate entity inside her, and when she wasn't under its influence, she was completely normal. He agrees to testify and gives her a tape recorder, explaining that Father Richard sent it to him before his arrest. As he is leaving, Erin asks if Father Richard had asked him to provide any medical help to Emily. Dr. Cartwright replies that Father Richard was already trying to stop Emily from harming herself and urging her to eat, but he, as a doctor, told him he couldn't assist. Erin visits Father Richard and excitedly tells him that Dr. Cartwright is going to testify. Father Richard then asks when he will get to testify, to which Erin replies she doesn't know. Father Richard emphasizes that what matters most is Emily's story, which only he can tell. He also inquires if she has considered dark forces and demonic attacks, to which Erin says yes. Erin shares that the day after Briggs testified, feeling awful, she took a walk to clear her head and wondered if demons really existed. During her walk, she found a gold locket on the sidewalk with the initials ECB engraved on it. She reveals that her full name is Erin Christine Bruner and reflects that it might have been a sign or just an incredible coincidence, but it made her feel that despite any past mistakes, she was exactly where she was meant to be. Father Richard notes that she sounds more like a mystic than an agnostic and asks if she is wearing the locket. Erin replies, no, and Father advises she should. Erin then tells him that the Archdiocese does not want him to testify, to which Father Richard responds that they are just afraid he might embarrass them. Later that night, Erin suddenly wakes up to whispering and sees that it is 3 a.m. on the clock. She then hears screaming in her house, and when she goes to investigate, she discovers the sounds are coming from the tape recorder. The next day, Erin asks Father Richard if he needed the church's sanction before performing the exorcism. He explains that on October 27 of the previous year, he presented his assessment and recommendation to the Archbishop, who authorized the exorcism before leaving the office. Erin then asks what happened that night. Father Richard recounts that he drove home, stayed up past midnight, studying the Roman ritual, and fell asleep with the book in his hand. He woke up freezing at exactly 3 a.m., which he explains is considered the demonic witching hour. This time is a way for demons to mock the Holy Trinity, as it inversely mirrors 3 p.m., traditionally seen as the hour of Christ's death. He thought he smelled something burning, but only later did he connect it, and he remembered that that same smell of something burning had been perceived by Emily. When he went out to check, he was terrified to see the eyes in a painting on the glass bleeding. In his fear, he tried to flee and managed to get out of the house. But outside, he noticed a figure standing some distance away. Thomas asks what the figure's gesture or nod meant, and Father Richard replies it was possibly an acknowledgement that the game was on. Thomas then asks if he understood the black-robed figure to be the devil, to which Father Richard says he believes it was a demonic manifestation. Thomas inquires why he thinks it appeared to him, to which Father Richard explains that demons can appear as apparitions, like ghosts, to provoke fear. Thomas asks if that night, while preparing for Emily's exorcism, was his first encounter with this demon. Father Richard confirms it was, and that he has seen it ever since. Erin asks Father Richard when he proceeded with the exorcism after receiving the bishop's authorization. He replies, it was on October 31st. She then shows him the tape recorder and asks if he can identify it. Father Richard confirms it is his, and that it contains the recording of the exorcism he conducted that night. Erin asks why he made such a tape, to which Father Richard explains that since the technology has been available, exorcists have used tape recorders to authenticate the ritual and provide a record for review. With the judge's approval, Erin asks Father Richard to play the tape for them. As the tape begins, the scene shifts to the past, showing Emily's exorcism. Father Richard instructs them to follow his commands without question and advises them not to ask the demon any questions or pay attention to what it says. They then restrain Emily and begin the exorcism, and as Father sprinkles holy water on her, Emily leans forward a little and opens her eyes. Meanwhile, Emily's sister notices that the crucifix hanging on the wall gets upside down. On the other hand, the demon frees itself and attacks Nathaniel, speaking in German, asking him if he thinks this will save the little girl. It then throws a doll, causing the door to open. Father Richard continues reading prayers, which makes the demon angry and scream. Father Richard demands to know the demon's name, but suddenly, a lot of cats enter the room. The demon, speaking in Latin, identifies itself as the one who dwells within. The cats then attack Father Richard, knocking him down, and as Jason and Nathaniel rush to help him, Emily frees herself, jumps out of the window, and runs away. They all follow her into a barn, where Nathaniel informs Father Richard that Emily is burned. Jason and Nathaniel try to restrain her, but she starts screaming loudly. Father Richard asks Dr. Cartwright to check her vital signs while he continues reading prayers. The demon uses all its strength to scare them, and the doctor reports that Emily's heart rate is 180 beats per minute. A snake then falls onto Father Richard, startling him, but he pulls out a crucifix and places it on Emily, causing her to writhe in pain and plead for it to be removed. The doctor tries to control Emily, but she strangles him, prompting the others to intervene. Father Richard demands the demon's name again, but the demon starts counting in German from 1 to 6, then screams names. It follows by counting in Arabic from 1 to 6. Father Richard insists it reveals its 6 names, and in response, the demon reveals their names as Cain, Nero, Judas, Belial, Legion, and Lucifer. The demon then screams, causing a horse to go out of control. When Nathaniel attempts to restrain the horse, it knocks him unconscious, and then Emily also collapses soon after. Father Richard explains that after a few months, Nathaniel recovered, but the exorcism had to be abandoned. Emily was returned to her room and soon fell into a deep sleep, and the exorcism was a complete failure. Erin asks Father Richard to describe Emily's behavior from the night of the failed exorcism until her death. He explains that she exhibited extreme violence toward herself and others. She would scream for hours, drive her head through windows, try to bite holes in walls, and ended up breaking several of her teeth. Erin asks if he attempted another exorcism, to which Father Richard replies that he wanted to, but Emily refused, and without the consent of the possessed, the exorcism ritual cannot be performed. He encouraged Emily to eat, but when she tried, she either couldn't swallow or couldn't keep the food down. Father Richard wanted her to continue receiving medical care, as it was beyond his expertise. Erin mentions that he suggested stopping Gambatrol, to which Father Richard agrees. He explains that after the exorcism, Emily sought his counsel and told him the drugs had never helped. They both concluded that she was beyond medical care and would have to rely on faith alone to see it through to the end. Erin asks if the dual voices heard on the tape were both coming from Emily at the same time, and Father Richard confirms they were, and when she asks if he tampered with the tape, he firmly says no. Thomas asks Father Richard if he is aware that Emily underwent advanced catechism training. Father Richard confirms this, and Thomas then inquires if Emily studied ancient Greek, Hebrew, and Latin during that training. Father Richard agrees, and Thomas suggests she might have even studied Aramaic, the language of Christ and his disciples, which was also heard on the tape. Father Richard acknowledges that Emily spoke Aramaic on the tape, but it wasn't part of her training. Thomas counters that Aramaic was offered as an elective at her catechism school, and that her high school records show she studied German, covering all the strange languages heard on the tape. Thomas then asks if Father Richard has ever heard of the superior vocal cords, which are higher than the ones typically used for speaking. Father Richard says no, and Thomas explains that Tibetan monks can activate both sets of vocal cords simultaneously as part of their training. Erin tells the judge that her next witness must have been detained and requests a short recess. On her way back, Erin encounters Dr. Cartwright, who asks her to tell Father Richard that he is sorry and that he knows the demons are real, admiring Father Richard's courage for standing and speaking against them. Suddenly, Dr. Cartwright becomes terrified, looking at something behind Erin, and as she turns to see, a car hit Cartwright. Later, Erin tells her boss that Dr. Cartwright is dead. Her boss shows her a newspaper clipping and accuses her of turning the trial into a spectacle, saying she put on a freak show with taped demons and a dead girl speaking in tongues, while her client testified that the Archbishop sanctioned the exorcism. Erin defends herself, explaining that she had a doctor who was going to corroborate the evidence, and that Father Richard's testimony is crucial to his defense. She asks to be replaced on the case, but her boss says she has screwed it up beyond all repair. However, the Archdiocese feels that replacing her now would only draw more unnecessary attention to the trial. He warns her that if she puts Father Richard on the stand again, he will fire her. Erin visits Father Richard and informs him that Dr. Cartwright was killed in an accident. She expresses her belief that they have lost the case since his testimony is no longer available. Father Richard insists it's not over, emphasizing that telling Emily's story is what truly matters. He urges Erin to let him go back on the stand to tell the rest of the story. He then gives her a letter and asks her to read it before deciding what to do next. The next day, Erin comes to court wearing the locket and recalls Father Richard to the stand. She asks him when he last saw Emily alive, and he responds that it was the night before she died when she called him and gave him a letter. Erin then asks if Emily was a good person, to which Father Richard replies that he believes Emily will one day be recognized as a saint. When Erin asks why, if Emily loved God, he allowed her to become possessed by demons and then die. Father Richard says he can let Emily answer that. Father Richard reads the letter, which says that on All Hallows Eve, Father Richard tried to cast 6 demons from Emily's body, but they refused to go. After the attempted exorcism, she was taken to her room and fell into a deep sleep. A few hours later, she awoke to a voice calling her name. The scene shifts to Emily walking outside toward a tree before collapsing. Emily watches herself lying on the ground and hears the voice calling her name again. It is the Blessed Holy Mother of God who smiles at her and says that heaven is not blind to her pain. Emily asks why the demons did not leave her that night. The Blessed Mother explains that the demons will stay where they are and offers Emily a choice. She can come with her in peace, free from her bodily form, or she can choose to continue suffering. The Blessed Mother tells Emily that although she will suffer greatly, through her, many will come to see that the realm of the spirit is real. Emily chooses to stay, causing her spirit to return to her body as she collapses to the ground. And when she gets up, she sees wounds on her hands. Erin asks if he saw the wounds on Emily's hands and feet, to which he confirms that the wounds lasted for some time. She then asks if he attributed any supernatural significance to these wounds, and Father Richard responds that he believes they were stigmata, a mark indicating one is touched by God. Erin asks why he thinks Emily refused another exorcism, to which he responds that he believes she had accepted her fate. Erin then quietly asks if there is anything else he'd like to say about Emily, to which he simply replies, no. Thomas argues that Father Richard attaches divine significance to the wounds on Emily's hands and feet because he wants to believe that Emily was a saint touched by the hand of God. Thomas suggests that the truth might be less inspiring because by the time the miraculous wounds appeared, Emily had already shown a tendency to injure herself and might have done so again on a barbed wire fence surrounding the Rose family farm. Thomas argues that Emily suffered because she was sick, not because she was a saint. He insists that while he is a man of faith, facts must be prioritized in this case. The facts are that Emily Rose had epilepsy, which caused psychosis, and with time, medicine could have cured her. However, she did not receive the necessary medical treatment because Father Richard convinced her she was not ill and did not need medicine. In the weeks leading up to her death, despite her clear need for medical care, Father Richard failed to have her hospitalized. Thomas tells the court not to believe Father Richard because the fact is, he argues, it wasn't the devil that did this to Emily Rose. It was Father Richard. Erin contrasts herself with Ethan Thomas, who calls himself a man of faith, while she describes herself as a woman of doubt. She acknowledges that concepts like angels, demons, God, and the devil either exist or do not. While she isn't sure if she fully believes that this tragedy was the work of the devil, she cannot deny that it is a possibility. Erin points out that the prosecution wants them to accept Emily's psychotic epileptic disorder as fact, because facts leave no room for reasonable doubt. However, she argues that this trial is about possibilities. She asks if it's a fact that Emily was hypersensitive. She cannot say for sure, but the question is it possible? She then questions whether it's a fact that Gambatrol anesthetized Emily's brain, rendering the exorcism ritual ineffective. She also asks if it's a fact that Emily was beloved by God and chose to suffer until the end so that others might believe in a world where the spiritual realm exists. Erin then states that the only fact she knows beyond a doubt in this case is that Father Richard loved Emily wholeheartedly and did everything in his power to help her. He has risked his very freedom so that her story could be heard. She acknowledges that in her job, she sometimes has to defend bad men, but insists that Father Richard is not one of them and pleads with the court not to send a good man to prison. Later, the verdict is delivered, and Father Richard is found guilty of negligent homicide by the jury. The judge announces that sentencing will be set for April 3rd. However, Erin points out that Father Richard requested at the start of the trial that if found guilty, he would be sentenced immediately. The judge then asks if Father Richard has any statements to make before sentencing. Father Richard responds with no, and at this point, a lady from the jury steps forward to recommend a sentence of time served. The judge accepts this recommendation, acknowledging Father Richard's guilt, but allowing him to go free. Later, Erin's boss approaches her and tells her that she has shocked everyone. He mentions that the archdiocese is pleased because the trial has generated public interest in the church. He admits he was wrong and offers her a full partnership in the firm, but she declines the offer before leaving. The next day, Erin asks Father Richard if he will be able to return to his parish. He replies that he cannot, explaining that once you have looked into the darkness, it stays with you for the rest of your life. He believes she has seen the darkness too, but Erin is unsure what she has seen. Erin then asks who chose the epitaph, and Father Richard reveals that he did, and it is from Philippians verse 12, a verse Emily recited to him the night before she died. Thanks for facing the frights with us. If you survived this video, drop a like, summon that subscribe button, and brace yourself for more horror. Until next time, stay spooked.